Welcome to our second Zoom brunch. I know last year when we did this, we said, okay, sorry, but this year we have to do the Zoom brunch. Next year, we'll all be back in person and have a wonderful time. And here we are next year, and we're still doing what we were doing. So I'm going to turn this over to Barb Hipsman-Springer, who is joining us from Portland, Oregon this morning. And we'll go from there. Barb, are you on?
Connie Schultz, I'm happy to say, said yes and is our speaker today. Connie's about our age being anywhere from, well, we do have some members who are 35, but most of us, you think you'd agree, are about 60-ish, maybe 70-ish. She was raised in Ashtabula, and where hope was stated as a fact, according to her and her mother. Her late mom said that. And both her mom and dad worked hard to ensure that their four kids got to college if they wanted to. And that Connie did. She went to Kent State University for a journalism degree, obviously. Connie then went to law school, later married her law school professor and had 2 children, but eventually became a single mom and with 2 kids. And she flourished by being a freelance writer, although I know that that's kind of hand to mouth. She joined the Plain Dealer in 1993 after 15 years on her freelance tour, as we call it. And from 1993 to 2011, she had an event-filled life at the Plain Dealer, was well known among reporters as someone who could get anybody to talk to them at any time. We learned that the grit that she had from Ashtabula actually applied to being a reporter pretty well. She didn't mind who she went up to and asked a question. I think I know how she is. That's kind of the upbringing I had too that brought me to journalism. Her career has been very interesting, but also very exciting. She was a Pulitzer finalist, which is hard to be, in 2002 for a series called Burden of Innocence. And that's where she caught the eye of many, many people at the national level because she was reporting on Michael Green, who was a convicted rapist in the Cleveland area. And Michael didn't do it. And so she followed it and followed it and followed it and wrote a series that got a lot of acclaim. And she got the JFK Award and the Batten Medal, which are tremendous. It's about covering humanity. And let's see, she then, I don't know, she married this guy with curly hair. He might be our state, our US Senator right now, of course, Sherrod Brown in 2004. And they kind of put both of their families together in one spot. I think that's been a very big change for both of them, but they both always are smiling. In 2005, she continued, of course, writing and what have you, writing at the Plain Dealer. And in 2005, she was given the Pulitzer Prize for commentary, which, as you all know, is the pièce de résistance for journalists. And it's just a coup. They lauded her for her passion, her courage, and her concern for the underdogs. And I think we can see that in her writing today. In fact, it was said in an era when journalists feel pressure to use social media to build their personal brands, Connie has done something far more intellectual and adapted the classic news column to her Facebook column, to her Facebook page. And she brings the best of traditional journalism to a forum vehicle that so many use for just their own self-promotion. And the judges really like that. Along the way too, in 2000, she's had 3 books out. And some of you may be familiar with some of them, but one of them was Life Happens. It was the first time she wrote it's a compilation of a lot of her columns and observations on them. Then she wrote another one the next year. I mean, if you're on a roll, she wrote one called Life Happens, and in 2006. Oh, but wait a second. The other one was And His Lovely Wife, because she had become the wife of a US Senator. A lot of times she was introduced, and his lovely wife, Connie Schultz, which I'm sure just galls her every time she hears it. And finally, in 2020, she published The Daughters of Eerietown, which is a New York Times bestseller. And if you haven't read it, give it for a Christmas present to yourself, because it's a fun book about our area of the world and the life that so many of us led into our careers. It's a true grit story. She said she's got a children's book coming in 2023. She's got 8 grandchildren, 4 children between them, and then 8 grandchildren among all those. And it's called Lola Trains the Trolls. So we might get to that today. And of course, we would be remiss if we didn't mention her 2 very special children, who are Franklin and are they there today?
Roaming around.
Okay. She's a grad of Kent State, of course, and now is a professor of residence at professional in residence at Kent State University, where she does opinion writing, feature writing, and ethics. Actually, stepping in when I retired, it was a great, I couldn't hold a candle to that, but the students adore her, and she's made a great, she's an inspirational teacher to students. They've been commenting on her to me and others since she arrived. And I guess that kind of brings us full circle, Connie, to, boy, you went to Kent State. How does Kent State look now? How is it different from when you were there?
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you, Barb, for that really generous introduction. As I said in the green room, I said yes because you asked, right? I love League of Women Voters, but everybody loves Barb. I hear stories about you all the time. I'm not kidding. I'm not that person. I don't make that up. I would just say, nice to see you, Barb. But I hear about you so much at the school. I did laugh. I've never been introduced as having married my law professor before, but I love to take advantage of this opportunity to tell people don't do that, okay? That's how I ended up becoming a single mother. Okay, so how has Kent State changed? Well, I mean, this week really illustrated it to me. I wrote my column about it in part with the shootings in Oregon, Michigan, right? With the teenager, the 15-year-old, and his parents have been apparently arrested this morning. Yes, they were found in a commercial building, hiding in a commercial building. When we start, every morning when we start opinion writing, as an example, my students know at this point, they come in and they got to know what the headlines are, because I just always say it's like an editorial board meeting. What are the headlines? What are we looking at today for opinions? But we knew that this week it was all going to be about the shootings, right? And something that one of my students said to me has really stayed with me and ended up being the hook of my column. She said, we've never known, this is what we've always known. We've never known anything different. We know that students die at school. They can be killed. And it really brought me back, because many of us are boomers. And certainly I was informed as a boomer that public life could be very dangerous, that public service could be fatal, because we lost our president, then we lost Martin Luther King Jr., and we lost Bobby Kennedy. And I don't think I fully understood how that affected the narrative in my head about our world until the January 6th attacks on the Capitol. My assumption was that Sherrod could be in harm's way, because we had about 40 minutes there where we didn't know where he was. I didn't for a moment think he could be automatically protected from harm. And I think part of that's just having been informed as a boomer. So it makes me think about our students now, and what is their worldview going to be? And who will they be as leaders? And what will they expect as leaders? And as you know, I ended that column by saying, well, they certainly expect, they have a right to expect more than what we've done, which is absolutely nothing right now. As far as the journalism, when Donald Trump was elected, the day after the election in 2016, I had a line, and I was brand new to the university as a professional resident. It was my second semester. And I thought, I need to go in. I need to be there. One of my classes had already been canceled because I knew a lot of my students were going to be out reporting that night and they were going to be spent, right? I'm really glad I showed up. So the line snaked out my office and down the hallway of students waiting to talk to me. And many of them I had not taught yet, but they were so worried about what this was going to mean. This man who was calling us the enemy of the people, who loved to get the crowds worked up to taunt, right? People that roused against the media. He would point to the journalists in the room.
Mhm.
They were worried about what this was going to mean for the profession. What I'm so proud of our students, why I'm so many reasons I'm so proud, but one of them is they rallied so quickly. They pivoted within really days. And it made me think of our Woodward and Bernstein moment for so many of us, where you realize that when there's a president who thinks he doesn't have to be held accountable, who doesn't like us, of course, this is so much worse than what they've been through, but they knew it was going to be their job. As
Mhm.
journalists, it was our job. They felt the mission of the work, that we would hold this president accountable, and that is our job. Because as you know, that the concern always is that it doesn't end with the president. It seeps down into county commissioners and city council members and mayors, people who think they don't have to be responsive to the media, then they can
We're
start
starting
calling
to
us
do it
fake news,
a lot more
right?
than
And
yeah.
that's what I've been training my students in part to understand. They can call, it's like my favorite quote ever is from Lucille Clifton, the late poet. What they call you is one thing, what you answer to is something else. And in this case, they can call us whatever we want, but we are empowered by the First Amendment to be asking these questions and to be holding public officials accountable.
Do you think the decline of media, I mean, we've seen it locally with the Record Courier.
Yeah.
We're down to 3 reporters in the county, and it's we have the Portager, of course, but I'm on that board. But I'm curious, what happens to democracy in a declining journalism situation that we have?
Well, I would say what's declining are our numbers right now. The quality of the journalism that we're seeing is high. I mean, so much of what we knew, for example, about the Trump administration came about because of the journalism, right? And organizations like the Portager,
True
pardon
journalism,
me?
not true journalism, not
Yes.
announcers. Fox
Well,
News,
I
CNN,
don't use
MSNBC.
yeah, I don't use journalism interchangeably. To me, when I'm talking about journalism, I'm talking about true journalism, traditional journalism. Fox News is not true, is not journalism, right? So I agree with you. I'm not
Okay.
talking about them. What I'm encouraged about are organizations like the Portager, which are popping up all over the country.
Mhm.
I see this as this ship is going to right itself, but well, not by itself. The reason I teach, the reason I'm willing to teach, is I think this new generation of journalists are going to help us sort out how to make it viable, how to keep it going.
Mhm.
In our newsroom at USA Today, I'm on the news meetings often first thing in the morning. There are so many young journalists there there's just so much creativity coming about in terms of how to promote the news, how to get the word out that we're doing this, so much more than I remember when I was in a newsroom, right? Which is what I had always hoped. You know, too many of our generations, you might recall, were too resistant to the web. They didn't want to have emails on their stories. And you could just see that they weren't going to make it in the profession because they were not willing to change. Change is hard. There's not a person on this call who doesn't know that, right? But we also know change is inevitable. And the only thing we're in control of is how we're going to respond to it.
I was thinking about your column today, your column or this week. And I might note that you were hired by a Kent State graduate of the School of Journalism. Kristen Delguzzi, who was born and raised in Kent, is now high up on the editorial page. She's the editorial page editor at USA Today.
And she's a fantastic editor, by the way, one of the best I've ever had.
She's tough. She was in Arizona and then she moved out to USA Today. And man, she's really turned heads there. And the best thing she did was one of her first hires, she said, was Connie Schultz. Why not? So we're happy you're there. But I think I'm concerned a little about you. The column addresses societal problems all the time and it's the favorite among readers. But how do you maintain your own mental health through all that?
Well, the readers who hate me would say I haven't, that I'm crazy. So that I appreciate the constant humor of that. This is a legitimate question and it deserves a legitimate answer, a serious answer. This has been a very challenging time during this pandemic. I learned early with the hate mail, for example, not to read it. If it's really awful and abusive, occasionally I'll post one because I think they're unintentionally hilarious. And I will then, make it, but I don't identify them. I'm not going to do that. That's like the 800-pound gorilla putting up this person with 10 followers and then they're going to attack and dox them. I'm not going to do that. But I do have ways to take care of myself. And I think everyone must figure out in her own way what this should be. For me, in part, I certainly stay in touch with family and friends. and I have friends who insist I will be in touch if they don't hear from me for a bit. They're
Mhm.
pretty bold that way because they know me well. Sharon and I, so many couples had to spend more time together than perhaps they ever had. Certainly for us, more than we had in
Mhm.
terms of days in a row. We were together 43 straight days when the pandemic first broke. And I'm accustomed to Sharon leaving for Washington on Monday and coming home Thursday night routinely, except when he's working in the state. So it was nice to discover that we really like each other's company a lot. A lot of walks, a lot of dogs, but I read a lot too. I took up needlepoint again. I made several pillows. I haven't needlepointed in years, but I needed something where I could, even if I was going to listen to the news, which of course is, I mean, I have to, but I'm also that junkie. I wanted to do something else that felt like I was creating something beautiful, that I was using my mind for something else. And it actually helps me because I'm working on a new novel. It helps me think about the novel. We walk a lot, as I said. There are books I turn to a lot. In fact, pardon my reach, I'm not Catholic, but To Bless the Space Between Us by John O'Donohue.
Mhm.
It's just a book of blessings. From everything from, suicide, which, as you know, I lost my brother to suicide in the summer of
Yeah.
2019, to fatigue, to exhaustion, to hope. It's just, I've given this gift as a gift to so many people in the last 3 years, because for me, I need the words of wisdom from other people. I love reading Mary Oliver a lot. I love reading poetry, period. I'm a big fan of
Mhm.
poetry. And you don't have to understand all poetry. Nobody does. That's not the point. It's like your favorite songs. What speaks to you? So I would encourage everyone, particularly when we're a lot of women here, right? Are we all women in this call?
No, I think there's a couple of,
Okay.
I see Bill Weiland, and I'm sure Graves is around, and
Well,
here, there, and everywhere. We have a lot of devoted young men helping us.
I'm grateful to them because they're not the men I worry about. Thank you for being so supportive of women in our endeavors. But we have mostly women on here, and I do want to speak to all of you directly. We are so accustomed to taking care of people in our lives and feeling responsible for the happiness of people in our lives. And I wonder how often you you even stop to think about what your story is, and have you shared it with the people who think they know you best? Because most people do not know us as well as they think they do. They know us as being very helpful and often cheerful when we're not feeling it, and many of us cook. I love to cook. I'm the one who feeds everybody. I think it's so important that you consider your own stories, if only to write them down for yourselves, to tell, because you have amazing stories about yourselves. And I think that's a great way to fuel a more upbeat sense of yourself, and perhaps helps with our mental health, is to understand that it is indeed a wonderful life, as hard as it has been. And had you not existed, many parts of the world would be different, even in your orbit. And I would love for more women to consider that about their lives.
I think I see Joanne Dowdy, and I know you've written a few things about yourself, kind of a biography, and I'm sure that felt good. And I see other members I know who are writers as well. Um, what do you do day to day? What's your schedule like? And oh, before we answer that, can we ask people to start dropping some questions for Connie into the chat room? You just go up to the right and click chat and type your question, and one of the hosts will deliver it to us. What do you do every day to keep your sanity? How does your day evolve? And what do you
Well,
have to have?
the days are different, which is probably good for my personality because I'm a newsroom animal by instinct. And you know how every day is a little unpredictable. But of course, it starts with coffee. You get the dogs out, you feed the dogs. When Sherrod's home, I have breakfast in bed every morning. So that included this morning. And he doesn't even drink coffee, but
Wow.
I know, he's really great that way.
You mean he's in the house right now?
Yeah, he's home today. He's in the house and he brought breakfast to me. I think that's
Oh,
why the dogs aren't here. I think they're hanging out with him right now. As you know, we were talking earlier in the week about what time I was going to join you. I try to write most mornings now because I am working on a new novel, and I also have a children's book due January 1st. I got to send in all of that. But I try to have some routines. So like if I'm writing, I don't have I see I burned my candle down. One of the little tricks of trades for writers. When I sit down to write, I put a tea light in this I have this at every desk where I work. And except for Kent State, I don't want to be burning candles in my office there. I light a candle and I try to work for as long as the candle burns. That doesn't mean I don't get up and about. And in fact, the desk I'm sitting at right now is one of those, you can raise it and stand at it too. Sherry got that for me a couple of years ago for Christmas. So I do have some built-in routines. Twice a week I teach, so I have to drive in to get ready to teach. I just told Sherry yesterday, I am so grateful during the pandemic that I was teaching because it gave me some routine. And it gave me a chance to help my students who were really struggling. I don't know how much I helped them, but I certainly tried. And I had all of them keep pandemic journals so that they would have a record of this time in their lives, because as I tell them regularly, they will be the storytellers of the pandemic. Long after we're gone, they're going to still be feeling the impact of this time in their lives. So I am a believer in routine. I think it helps, but I also think you got to be open to the spontaneity of life. For me, at least, I have to have open space. And part of that is simply because, as my editor, Kate Medina, told me at Random House years ago, walk away from the work for a while. Your mind will keep working on the story for you if you just don't try to distract it with go do other things, so I garden in the warmer, weed and stuff. And I love feeding the birds. I go for walks. I will do the things that I can do that takes my mind off it. And then my mind does keep working, I find, and I write down ideas. I suddenly get breakthrough moments for the writing. And I don't know how else that comes about unless you give yourself space to think.
Cool. We've been faced with I'm going to ask again, there's a lot of people on, and please post your questions so that you can stop listening to me and hear more from Connie. Come on. As we see in the media, it's not just media that has an effect on our knowledge and our attitudes about what's going on in the country. What's the best way for each individual to fight misinformation or disinformation?
In some ways, it feels so simple to me, but I understand I'm accustomed to being outspoken about what I believe to be the truth, right? But all of you who are here with us today, you have far more influence with the people in your immediate circle than I ever will have. And so I would say start there. If you hear or see misinformation, if it's being posted on social media by people you know, I understand it can be a nervous thing the first time to weigh in and say, well, that's not true. And here's a link to what actually happened. And here, but it does become a rewarding habit. And it's not being I told you so. It's not being confrontational, although people will accuse you of being confrontational if you're making clear that they're posting false information. But the in person and on social media are two of the ways to be most effective in that way. And listen, it comes from everywhere. I had a woman about a month ago say her pastor keeps putting out newsletters that are full of misinformation about the vaccine, and what could she do? And I said, well, I suppose I'm supposed to say pray on it, but I don't think that God. I'm a woman of faith. I think he wants a little bit more of us than that. And I encouraged her to first reach out to him directly. And if he's not willing to be respectful about that, then she's going to have to figure out other ways to reach the congregation. She clearly wants to. And I said, well, a group email could do it. You could get on the church website. You could bring it up at church. Because I agree, she should be challenging misinformation. Lives are at risk right now. Upstate New York, they're bringing in their National Guard to help in nursing homes. I just read that this morning on the Times website, because so many health workers are either exhausted or they're quitting because they won't get vaccinated. I mean, we are about, I'm afraid, we're on the brink of another period of massive hospitalizations if people don't get vaccinated.
Deb, would you like to ask the next question?
Sure. We have a question that asks, if you could change one thing about your past, what would that be?
Well, I'm not going to admit that publicly, but I will say this. But I will also say this. I'm not one for a lot of regrets. We all make mistakes. And if I hunker down, I think the better way to put it is we are all better than our biggest mistake. And a lot of us can get really stuck in something that makes us feel bad about who we once were. But I don't know about the rest of you. I have my guess. We have all evolved a great deal since the time of our last biggest mistake. So to me, that seems more about a question of regret. And the best way to own our regrets, I think, is to do better.
Thank you. Connie, you're a big reader. You have mentioned that. What are some of your favorite holiday stories?
Well, I have a hard time thinking there's anything better than Dickens.
Oh,
And, you know, I mean, I think part of it is because I really do love the story about Scrooge and what happens with him. I just had to share my favorite movie of Scrooge is Patrick Stewart's performance, and we always watch it every year. I also, though, because I moderate, as Barb mentioned, I'm pretty active on Facebook, and it's a public Facebook account. And I love hearing people's stories of the holiday. Right now, we did a recent thread on favorite ornaments, because so many ornaments come with stories. And I don't mean to suggest we're not serious all the time. Well, we're not serious all the time. We talk about plenty of news events every day on Facebook, but I try to mix it up because nobody is just one thing. And as much as Sharon and I care about what's happening in the world and in the country all the time, we also get a kick out of watching our dogs be ridiculous, for example, and we have fun. And I love decorating for Christmas. So I like, when we talk about Christmas stories, the stories that most interest me at this point beyond Dickens are the personal stories of other people. I'm especially interested in them this year because there's so much loss for our country, right? And last Christmas was just devastating, and Hanukkah and all the different holidays, because people couldn't get together at all. Some are able to get together now, but now you're seeing that dividing line bar between the vaccinated and the unvaccinated, right? And should we do this together? Should we? And it's tearing families apart. So I think it's important to talk about all of that. I think those two are going to be our stories of Christmas. And that's why, again, I would encourage all of you who are with us today, write down your memories of this time, write down your thoughts during this time. No one else has to see them if you don't want them to, but it might inspire you to write that letter, that email to more people in your family to help them understand where you are right now and how you're feeling in this holiday time. I think that can be really important, but I also think it can be very restorative for a person who's been through a lot.
I see what your point is, and some of us have the pleasure of having a little white hair here, so we know what what the years have brought, and maybe we could have an effect on younger members of your extended family. Certainly, I see a question on the line about disinformation and misinformation from Melanie. And she said they're polite, misinformation and disinformation are polite variations of outright lies.
Sure.
I'm disillusioned with political advertising and the outright lies candidates fling at one another. Where's the accountability in the FCC? She said, maybe this is outside of your wheelhouse, but I'm interested in why lies aren't called out and TV stations are allowed to allow political ads that can't be substantiated in the light of day.
Well,
are there any rules?
I hate to be partisan here, but it is a partisan thing. Republicans got rid of the FCC rules for political advertising quite some time ago. Also fair advertising, where if you do a story on this candidate, you must do it on that candidate. And now it's up to the individual news stations whether or not they want to do that. Look, lies have always been a part of politics, unfortunately. I agree we should call them lies. I remember in the beginning months in the Trump administration, I was using the word lie, not and newsrooms were having these big debates. Can we say he lied if we don't know what's in his mind? We don't know his intention. It was driving me crazy. I got dropped by some papers. I was syndicated at that point. But as you know, over time, and I don't mean, hey, look at me, how right I was. A number of us columnists were doing this. We just thought, why are we dancing around this concept of lie, falsehood, misstatement? So much of it was an outright lie, to the point where the Washington Post then started doing it, a daily count of the number of lies coming out of that administration. We were willing to do that, but it is really astonishing to me, and this is not always a partisan thing. It's not just Republicans who will lie. I understand that, and I understand you're a nonpartisan group, and I'm in a nonpartisan profession, but I'm a columnist, and I'm also uncomfortable making it sound like everybody does it. Everybody is not doing it to this extent. I mean, I have to look at Jim Jordan from Ohio to see how reckless his speeches over and over again. And I think it's hard when you're a nonpartisan organization. You're trying to just keep voters focused on the issues, right? You want them to care about the issues. My job is to also call out just how awful it is when these lies get believed. I mean, look, there's a reason that the linguist George Lakoff talked about the truth sandwich. Readers believe what they see first. Audiences believe what they heard first. So you tell the truth, then you provide the false statement by the politician, and then you provide the truth again, the truth sandwich. That way, the framing is, here's something you're going to hear that's not true because here's the known fact. This is what that person said, because we do have to report on what public officials and candidates are saying. And then to say again, but again, this is not true. Here are the facts. Now, we know based on the absolute divide in this country right now, there are people who aren't going to care how often we tell them what's true and what's not, right? And I agree with the person who asked the question. It is so frustrating to watch these ads that are full of lies. And why do TV stations do it? And the absolute easy answer to that is money. They get so much money. I can tell you, Sherrod's campaign, I forget if it's 80% or higher of the overall budget has gone to television advertising, right? That's shifting some. There's a lot more being done online now too. But there is a tremendous amount of money to be made by these TV stations who are hurting in ways just as newspapers are, right? So it's station by station. What are they going to require of candidates? Which means what money are they going to be willing to turn away because they're going to stand for what is right? So in my view, the pressure needs to come from my fellow Americans on these television stations. If you're concerned about the TV ads that are running, that's where it starts. But keep in mind, you're going to be seeing their ads every time you sign on to the website. Wherever you live, you're going to start seeing the ads of candidates. That's how it works with the algorithms. On Google, on Facebook, on Twitter, you're going to be seeing more of this. And it can be very frustrating. It can be infuriating. But I want to remind you of this. If you know the truth, you're already ahead. And don't underestimate the value of being somebody who knows the truth and is willing to share that truth with others.
I think a good positive is that also you can not just use one source of information. I actually watch Fox News at least once a day, I have to admit, just to get an idea. And then I listen to MSNBC, and then I check out the local papers as well, and a few Facebook pages. And yeah, that takes about an hour, but it seems like I get a better roundup of things. So I'm sure you'd agree, just don't stick with one.
I agree with that. I feel a little differently about Fox. I will watch Fox occasionally. I'll look at clips because I'm hearing about something. But for me, it's a way of keeping an eye on just how much disinformation they're putting out into the world. There's no one worse there than Tucker Carlson. And to pretend, and I'm not saying you are pretending, to pretend otherwise, to pretend that he is on par, right, with a straight news person or even an opinion columnist who still does reporting. I mean, the emphasis on opinion writing in my class, to the absolute shock of my students for the most part in the beginning of the semester, this is not just you throwing out your viewpoints. This is you reporting and researching to support your arguments, right?
Exactly.
So there are certainly columnists I don't agree with often, but I can see the work they've put into it. And we have an honest disagreement about how something should be. That's different from people just throwing out whatever they want to and being called journalists. It drives me crazy.
We have a good follow-up question, I think, Connie, to what you were talking about. Gail asks, Fox News reinforces the beliefs of the far right and MSNBC reinforces the beliefs of the left. Where do we go to get more balanced views on television?
I think that's a fair question, although I will say that MSNBC has more rules for engagement than Fox does. I mean, I've been on MSNBC a lot. I do a lot of pre-show interviews.
Engagement? What is a rules? What do you mean?
What I mean is you can't just spout nonsense. You can't, you're going to be like, look at Rachel Maddow, for example. You go through extensive interviews with a producer before you even get on the show. She's going to want to know that you can support your arguments, right? I'm not saying they all do it that well, but there is a different standard for that than there is on Fox. As you can see, I really hate Fox. I have no problem saying that. I think it's done a lot of harm, a lot of damage to the country. Leading up to the Iraq War and after, I remember Pew published a study at one point. The number of people who still believed there were weapons of mass destruction after it absolutely had been proved otherwise tended to be viewers of Fox. They're going to propagate this, and it is propaganda. So where do you go? Look, I don't watch MSNBC as much because it gets my blood boiling. But it's great on breaking news. Like when I'm in the car and I'm trying to find, when I hear something's happening, I know they're going to be on the scene, as will CNN, which I do think is nonpartisan. And they have a lot of Republicans on there, no matter how much the right goes after them, because it's not their kind of Republicans, right? I understand that. But I'm going to always be first and foremost print. I go to USA Today, New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal reporting, not their editorial board. I've subscribed to a lot of things. And I do that, and NPR, of course. NPR is on my radio virtually all the time. And I do this because I trust them for breaking news. I also trust the network, NBC, CBS, ABC. Do I think they get it wrong? Sure, we all make mistakes, but they are more likely to correct it because they're actual journalists, right? So it sounds to me, in part, what you're asking is, or what the answer to this is, get away. I say this as an opinion writer.
Mhm.
Don't come to me for the breaking news, right? I'm going to share breaking news links, but I'm going to be weighing in on the breaking news. For breaking news, for big developments, we want to go to traditional journalism that we know is doing the work of trying to get the information to us as quickly as possible. And I really rely, like this Oxford, Michigan shooting, the Detroit Free Press has been outstanding in its coverage. I will go to the local news organizations when something's happening in their area.
Okay, let's change gears just a little bit. From Iris, she asks, we are facing the potential of Roe v. Wade being overturned. What, if anything, might journalism do to resist what this will mean to all of us?
Well, I don't think journalism is what's going to help you here. I think it's going to have to be the activism of the electorate, the insistence. I mean, certainly journalism has a role to play. We're covering this. We have some outstanding writers about the Supreme Court. We have Adam Liptak at the New York Times. We have Dahlia Lithwick at Slate. We have Nina Totenberg at NPR. I mean, we've got some very strong voices helping us understanding what's happening in the courts. I think one of the things journalism can show perhaps more effectively is this is one of the very real consequences of Senate elections, because that's how these nominees ended up on the Supreme Court. And the other thing that journalism is going to be able to do, I'm already hearing from some of these people, we're going to have the horrifying stories of women who are going to start resorting to other means for what should be, in my view, a legal and safe abortion. And we're going to be going back to the stories of the 40s and the 50s and the 60s. But this time we're going to have so many more tools to tell those stories than we had back then. And they're going to be immediate, and they're going to be, unfortunately, graphic. They're going to be, well, we'll see. I hope not. I mean, look, I don't want any of this to happen, but I am convinced that if they whittle down Roe v. Wade, we are going to be seeing these tragic stories grow in numbers.
Thank you. We have a question here from Tiara Moore, who is a recent
Tiara was in
a recent
my class.
graduate of Kent State. Yes.
I'm so proud of you, Tiara.
She asks, going back to recent headlines, how do we uplift student voices so that as a society, we can make actual changes with gun control in this country?
Well, as Tiara knows, and Tiara just got elected to public office herself.
Yes, she did.
And Tiara, I think I was so excited when I heard your news. I sent it to Sharon right away and to our director, and I forgot to respond to you. I've been telling everybody else about you, so I apologize. You'll be getting that email from me this weekend. Student voices. I tell my students this all the time. I'm sure Tiara will remember it. They don't care what you have to say because they know you're not voting. So the single most important thing that more students can be doing is registering to vote and exercising that vote. We know what younger adults care about in this country. They care about the climate. They very much care about the environment. They care about student debt. They care about abortion rights. They care about voting rights and civil rights, right? The additional civil rights. But the thing is, you're voting in too small a numbers right now. This is typical of the age group. That boomers were not good at voting when we were in our 20s, right? Until Vietnam War, we had something that really helped mobilize us. Mm-hmm. So there are many ways to lift students' voices, but your voices really matter more when you can show the proof of, and look at these thousands of people behind me who are about to vote you out of office. who are about to mobilize and support this candidate who's going to win against you, defeat you in office. Here's where our dollars are going to go. And we are not going to support businesses that refuse to serve, bakeries who refuse to bake wedding cakes for the LGBTQ community. Here are the hundreds in your block area alone who will never get in letting everybody know they won't shop. There is so much power in raising your voices. Look, I come from a union family. I came from a family where I learned very young, when you're people like my people, your strength comes in numbers. That was true of the women's movement. Our strength came in our numbers, right? So while it's important to have our leaders, and Tiara is definitely going to be one of those, she already is. Tiara, I would ask of you, in any way you possibly can, mobilize your generation of voters, help them see that when they raise their voices, not just literally raise their voices, but raise their voices through the power of the vote and the power in numbers, that's when you're going to start seeing the changes you want to see that are going to address the issues that your generation has a right to demand of this country.
Thank you. We have one more question from Damien. What can the excellent journalists you referred to earlier do to be heard above the tremendous background noise of the divisive opinion posing as journalism that is so often used to fill the 24-hour news cycle?
I wonder if this is Damien, who is also a former student, who's now a working journalist. Look, I got my start as a freelancer in Cleveland, and I was working at the Plain Dealer. And I have, how do I say this? I never want to be self-laudatory. I had so many people tell me how limited my career would be if I stayed at the Plain Dealer. I had so many people tell me in my own newsroom that I wanted too much of this, I wanted to do too much of that. One of the things I learned is to ignore the negative voices. You will always have somebody with low expectations of you. It's always fun to exceed them. Find the editors in your newsrooms who actually believe in your work and who can help you get better at what you do. But the biggest part of this is to see the bigger vision for yourself. Damien and Tiara may recall, in class I would talk about how when I was young, when I was in my early 20s, no matter who I was writing for, I told myself I was writing for the New York Times. And because for me, the New York Times at that point was where I wanted, that was the thing I read every day, the newspaper I read every day. That was the kind of reporter I wanted to be, the writer. And now I've had numerous opportunities to write for them, and I love that. But what mattered is, what was the voice in my head saying? What was the message to myself? And the message to myself was, in part, I just said this to my editor the other day. She says, well, I don't know. 2 other people have already written about that. And I said, I don't mean to be arrogant about this, but I've always told myself nobody's written about it until I do, because I'm going to do my own reporting, my own research.
Exactly.
And at this point in my life, I've been thinking about it for a long time, longer than some of the younger people writing about it. And I've got something to say on this. You must be your own best advocate. And that's hard. Most journalists don't like to think of the business of the work. They don't tend to be out, a lot of them never do public speaking. It feels unseemly to advocate for yourself. But I'm telling you that my career would never have gotten where it is, if not for 2 things. In my case, mostly women who supported me in the newsroom, who were in a position to help me get promoted and to advocate for me. One exception, dramatic exception, was Stuart Warner, one of the best editors I've ever had. But the other thing was that I would go home, and no matter how defeated I felt sometimes, I had to sort out what comes next for me. And the reason I could do that is because it was never really about me. I believe in the mission of the work. And when you believe in the mission of traditional journalism, really important journalism, Damien, you find ways to commit it. And I do think that the quality bubbles up, that you end up getting noticed for your work. You do end up getting bigger stories. You become that, one of the easiest ways to rise in newsrooms is to not be that headache the editor ever has to have. You meet your deadlines. You make your copy as clean as you can. You're open to the discussion on how to make it better, always. And so there's a lot going on in this, I realize, but the bottom line is the first person who needs to take you seriously as a journalism is you. It does start with you. I never use sports metaphors except for this. When you're at the plate in baseball, so much of that is a head game. You get in a hitting slump, right? I think of writing the same way. The biggest, most important obstacles sometimes, the one we have to get over, is the one in our own heads. It's so easy to underestimate ourselves. So I would say, if that's not working for you, try thinking bigger for yourself. Try to believe that even if you're not seeing what you can do yet, that it's in you. And that's the flower you're going to water. That's the bloom you want in your life. And you're the one who's going to tend it.
You know, that's a good word of advice for both of Tiara and Damien. I guess we have a question from Jackie Peck, one of our members, who said, how can we most effectively support journalism other than subscribing and reading, of course? What can normal humans do? We're not reporters. We're not going to go out and report.
Sure, but you can certainly support. You can, if you're on social media, you can share links to effective reporting, to strong journalism. It goes back a little earlier what we were talking about when you see people posting falsehoods, come up with the credibility links. Like just yesterday, I had somebody say, well, Kyle Rittenhouse's mom drove him to that site. We now know that's not true. And PolitiFact has a false finding on that. And I just shared the link. She didn't mean, I mean, a lot of people believe that. They don't know it's not true. I don't need to go into this whole, well, that's not true. And how can you know? I just put up the link. Sometimes I'll say, for your edification, here's additional information. Also, personally, I would say when you see people complaining about paywalls, I love it when occasionally somebody who's not in journalism says, yeah, but I am willing to pay for that subscription because I want to support journalism, and journalists have to support families too, right? And they have a right to make their own living wage. And by the way, USA Today is only $1 a week right now. We're having this deal. So as much as I hate being behind a paywall, I understand why I am. They think I can bring in readers, and they think I can bring in subscribers, and I want to support the newspaper that's supporting me.
And $1 a week, I'll want to read Connie. So you're worth $1, babe.
Thank you. Thank you.
I agree.
Okay,
Connie, I would like to ask you just one more question, if I could, please.
Sure.
What gives you hope?
Oh, I see signs of hope all around me. I see hope in the number of people who were willing to join us this morning. Start with that, right? On a Saturday morning, you had so many things you could be doing, and you chose to spend some time with us. So how could I not have hope about that? That means you haven't given up. You know, I say this often, in part because I have to remember it for myself some days. Every morning we get up, we answer the same question, regardless of whether we're aware of it. Is this the day that I give up, that I can't do that, I'm not in it anymore? Or is this the day I get out of bed and I try again? And I don't mean try to live. I mean, try to engage in the world, try to care about what we care about. And I think that's really an important question that all of you answered this morning. You're still trying. I spend so much time with young people. How can I not be hopeful, right? I highly recommend it. I was just telling Sharon the other day, you know, you should not have just senators as close friends. That's why I don't have just journalists as close friends, because you need the depth and breadth of life in your life, right? And I need the wisdom and the friendship and the shared experiences of people who've known me so many years, none of whom write for a living. You know, I have some good friends who are writers, but the mix. And I really recommend having younger people in your life. And if that's not happening right now, there are so many opportunities for it. But the other thing, it sounds so corny, but Sharon and I do talk about this fairly frequently. Just when we started to, sometimes we can feel pretty exhausted by this, as you can imagine, but then we think of our grandchildren. Mm-hmm. And when in 2016, here was my career plan. My editor at Random House and my agent, they just want me to write fiction, right? So I thought, okay, Hillary Clinton's going to win the presidency, and I'm going to say goodbye to the column and write full time. And boy, did that blow up. And one of the reasons I decided to keep writing that column is I get very emotional thinking about this. I want my grandchildren, particularly our 4 granddaughters, to know that when it got so ugly, that grandma didn't give up, that grandma stayed in, right? And I know that sounds really, but I'll tell you what, on many a day, it has worked for me. Just yesterday, I think it was 2 days ago, this angry reader said to me, you know, he doesn't like this. And his punchline was, just go be a grandmother. So I said, angry reader told me, just be a grandmother. And then I posted a photograph of my our 4-year-old Ella and me, and we're both wearing Wonder Woman headgear. And I said, "Be careful what you wish for." And it's had, I forget how many thousands it's gotten on Twitter now. The point being, we are never one thing, right? We are never one thing. But being a grandmother has really fueled something. And I have to say, I've become the grandmother I used to mock at my friends, because some of my friends became grandparents before I did. And I thought, oh, for God's sakes, enough about the grandchildren. Really? I mean, and then I had grandchildren. I'll do anything for my grandchildren. So there you go.
Thank you. Barb, did you have anything else you wanted to say?
It just in closing, I know that so many of our members are on today, and it's encouraging to hear your voice, your tone. You do a lot of the curating of your own Facebook's response.
I do all of it. All of
I
it.
know. How many hours does that take you every day? And
it doesn't take as much as that it can appear, but some days I don't post something that I know is going to be really controversial until I can be there to moderate.
Nice.
You know, Columbia Journalism Review did a piece on my Facebook page about, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years ago, because at that point, people were starting to get interested. How is it that we're maintaining this community? And I said, well, that's how we're doing it, because enough people have been following Facebook, my account, for that they wanted to preserve what we have there. And so they would alert me when somebody showed up and started trolling, or it was saying horrible, racist, homophobic, misogynist things. Now we got the problem with just the regular trolls showing up that out of nowhere. But that's how my children's book came about. This is how, I'm not kidding. This is how it all came about. There was a guy named Tom, not really, Tom, who was trolling like crazy. I'm getting rid of him as fast as I can. I block him and then delete, delete, delete. And finally I just said, Tom the troll has been blocked. And somebody said, you should do a children's book called that. So I went over on Twitter, just having fun. I said, I'm thinking of writing a children's book and calling it Tom the Troll Has Been Blocked, because I deal with trolls all the time. An hour later, my agent reaches out to me that a children's division, Razorbill of Random House, the editor said, we want that book. So that is how, and so now I have a contract, and I decided I didn't want to send her the troll the headline. The working title is Lola Trains the Troll. And it's this little girl, she's going to be Latina, because our little Ella is. And this kid in the troll is always throwing up billboards and signs, mocking everything about her as she walks to school. And she keeps trying to change herself because she's paying attention to that, until she realizes she's not the one with the problem, right? He is. So I thought, I hope this is the kind of book where parents are really getting, oh, I know where this is going. I know who that guy is. But children, it's about bullying, right? So it's been a lot of fun. I'm having a blast. I love children's books. I mean, I've been buying them long before my grandchildren were born. I just love them. But so now I'm doing that, and it's kind of fun. No, it's a lot of fun.
Well, we're getting close to the end of the year here, and the league, I think, struggles with staying nonpartisan, of course,
Sure.
but also what to do in the next year that would really make an impact on voters enough to get more of them to the polls. And so for our final thing today, maybe you could give us some advice and some hope as to what can we do to most affect our voting public.
Well, I would like to see you continue your work on voting rights, particularly with the redistricting maps and things that are going on right now in Ohio. There's nothing more important than making sure, doing all that you can to ensure that people have the right to vote and will be able to exercise their vote, right? I want to say something about partisanship. If you stand for anything these days, you will be accused of being partisan. If you stand for voting rights, you will be accused by some on the right as being a partisan organization. My point to this is, we're going to go back to Lucille Clifton's quote again. What they call you is one thing. What you answer to is something else. You are not a wing of the Democratic Party when you are fighting for people's rights to vote. What you are is adhering to the Constitution and protecting people and their rights to vote. I see this in my own profession too sometimes. We got so nervous about being accused of being partisan that we did too much he said, she said stuff, and just started printing everything. Especially, we saw that first, I think, really dominantly with John Kerry when he ran for president in 2004 and the Swift boat thing came about. It should have been said right at the beginning, this is a false accusation. He served in Vietnam. this is exactly what happened, which is how he got his medals. But we didn't know how to respond to it in the way that we should have, I think. We should have learned from that. And so you will always be accused of being something you aren't when you take a stand. In this political climate, the accusation will typically be that you're liberals or that you're Democrats. If you know who you are, it doesn't matter if personally you are, if you know your work is nonpartisan, I say do not spend a lot of time responding to the partisan charges. Again, you got out of bed that morning, you know what your work is going to do the work and move forward and grow your ranks. I love the League of Women Voters. You are known to be strong and informed, highly researched, and advocates for voters. There's a reason you have that title. And so be that advocate and do not listen to the noise. Don't let the noise prevent you from doing the work that you need to do.
Perfect way, Deb, to close up today. Deb?
Connie, it's been delightful. You have been edifying, encouraging, and energizing. So thank you so much for joining us. And just to kind of wrap things up, I want to share my favorite holiday stories with you for a reason, not with just you, Connie, with everybody.
Yeah.
I always love the little match girl and the gift of the Magi, A Christmas Carol, of course, and the Russian tale about babushka. And what I learned from these, and I share these with my grandchildren, is be thankful and charitable, keep love in your heart, embrace selflessness, be generous, and remember what's important. So with that, I say once again, Connie, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. A special shout out to Audrey Kessler and Melanie Neff for their help with all of our communications. Have a wonderful holiday, everyone.